Scheming and plotting per usual, Dorothy had attempted to drive a wedge in Kevin's marriage to Lily, so that he would have to hand over his riches and ensure Dorothy's lifelong comfort. Reeling from his difficulties at home, Kevin learned that he'd been beckoned by Wayne Ford and Harley Shepard, who supposedly just missed his company, but who surely have a new assignment for him. Kevin looked at the buildings around him and casually mentioned one of the landmarks that he saw, as Dalton confirmed his location before they both hung up. 2 hours later, the two of them arrived at the Healing Arts School. By now, it was already pretty late, and if Harley Shepard and Wayne Ford were ordinary old men, they might have already been fast asleep by this time of the night. Fortunately, with their power base, even if they didn't eat or drink for 3 days and 3 nights, it wouldn't be a problem. Similarly, staying up at this hour was no issue for them. "Why did you call us here in the middle of the night?" Kevin took the initiative to ask as he casually sat down on the sofa and picked up some fruit from the coffee table in front of him to munch on. Dorothy's attacks on him at home had prevented him from having a romantic dinner with Lily, and now he was quite hungry. Wayne Ford narrowed his eyes for a moment but had no time to argue with him and got straight to the point.
"There's a simple matter that I need you to take care of."
"What simple matter?" Kevin replied, raising an eyebrow. He had a bad feeling in his heart based on the bizarre smile on Harley Shepard's face. Believing that this discussion didn't concern him, Dalton sat quietly off to the side while drinking some tea.
"An ancient tomb was recently discovered somewhere within the Rocky Mountains, and this has attracted the attention and interest of several other parties. As such, I want you and Dalton to go there and bring 2 objects back,"
Wayne Ford instructed calmly.
"How is that a simple matter?"
Dalton said right away as he spat out the tea in his mouth. At this moment, Kevin's expression also changed drastically. "What did you just say? Where are we going?" he demanded. Kevin couldn't let on that he knew the ancient tomb all too well.
"You heard me. We want you and Dalton to go to the ancient tomb in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. Now that all of the major powers have already made moves to get there first, the Healing Arts School naturally can't afford to fall behind."
Wayne seemed to have expected Kevin's reaction and continued to speak in a flat tone. "I'm not going. Even if I'm beaten to death, you can't force me to." Kevin shook his head and waved his hands unwillingly with all his strength. "Do you think that going into the ancient tomb is a joke? If you're not careful, you could easily lose your life in there within the first 10 seconds. I don't owe you anything, so why should I listen to you?" He was well aware of how fraught with danger the ancient tomb was. Unbeknownst to Wayne Ford and Harley Shepard, he, Dalton, and Shannon Tate had just gone to the tomb in Mount Evans and almost died. Aside from that, there were several other major powers who were going there for the same reason this time around. If they started a fight with any of them, they would surely be able to blast him and Dalton to pieces.
"You're still a student of the Healing Arts School, so it is only right for you to obey the dean's orders."
Despite his response, Wayne didn't show any dissatisfaction as he calmly poured himself a cup of tea.
"There is news that one of the 7 divine weapons is inside the ancient tomb. As for exactly what it is, we're not sure yet."
Wayne Ford took a sip of tea before he continued.
"However, if you think that there's nothing in it for you, then fear not, as we won't let your trip be in vain. If you manage to bring back the heavenly floral grass, that is yours to keep. Moreover, we've already sent some of our men there, so you can rest assured that we won't let you fight alone."
"Dean Ford, why do I feel like you're just saying that to trick me into going? I don't care about divine weapons, but I have to ask, is it really true that the heavenly floral grass can be found inside the ancient tomb?" Kevin asked as he narrowed his eyes, and his expression gradually became serious. Kevin enjoyed a game of cat and mouse, and he knew he had formidable opponents in Ford and Shepard. He would have to get information out of them without revealing that he had information of his own. He clearly remembered that there was a detailed record of the heavenly floral grass in one of the secret books that were in his possession. It was an extremely rare ingredient that could be used to significantly boost one's health, making one immune to all kinds of poisons. More importantly, it was something that was indispensable in refining the heavenly sky pill. When it came to the medicinal pills that were recorded in the secret book, Kevin had already familiarized himself with most of their pill formulas, but he was still unable to refine about 40% of them. The reason for this was very simple, and it wasn't due to a lack of herbalism skills. Rather, while he knew the pill formulas, he was unable to find the medicinal ingredients he needed to refine them. Getting his hands on the heavenly floral grass would go a long way toward overcoming that obstacle.
"So, are you going or not?"
Wayne asked faintly. Although Wayne Ford looked calm on the surface, he was actually panicking deep down as he wasn't sure whether Kevin would agree to go or not. After all, this matter was something that the Night King had informed him personally. And if they messed up and the divine weapon fell into someone else's hands, Wayne Ford wouldn't be able to explain this failure to him. Meanwhile, Harley Shepard had tactfully called Dalton away. He said that he had something to tell him, but in fact he really just wanted to leave enough space for the other two to talk things over. At that moment, the huge office suddenly became very quiet. As Kevin looked at the tea in his cup, he gritted his teeth and sighed. "Must I really go, Dean Ford? I don't understand why you specifically asked me to go on this mission for you. I'm sure there are so many other experts in the school who are both willing and able."
"Kevin, you're a smart person. Can't you see such a simple thing?"
Wayne lowered his eyes and added,
"You only have to look within yourself to find the answer to your questions."
After thinking for a moment, Kevin put down his teacup and took a deep breath. "Dean Ford, I don't know why you're expecting so much of me, but the truth is that I'm not that ambitious of a person. In fact, let me tell you something. If it wasn't for everyone forcing these responsibilities on me, I would rather go back to being an ordinary man. If I were given the chance to decide the course of my future, I would just want to spend the rest of my days with my wife and live a peaceful and simple life with her." Upon hearing this, Wayne Ford simply smiled. He then reached out and patted Kevin's shoulder.
"It's not as easy as you think to just walk away from it all. Now that you've embarked on this path, it'll be extremely difficult for you to escape the call of justice once your moral compass kicks in."
His meaning was very obvious. Even if the Night King didn't urge him to do so, as long as Wayne Ford knew about the ancient tomb, he would still want Kevin to handle it. Although this young man hadn't completely accepted his calling yet, Wayne Ford could see that Kevin wasn't a person who would be willing to stay in a corner if the safety of the entire world was at risk. Courage and valor would always be Kevin's driving forces. Therefore, while the heights of Kevin's future potential were hard to imagine, he had to use every opportunity to train him, as well as provide enough guidance to pave the way for him to become ready to lead one day. "Fine. Since I can't get rid of my responsibilities as your student so easily, I might as well treat it as community service for this school. When will I set off?" Helplessly backed into a corner by Wayne Ford's words, Kevin could only choose to yield and agree.
"Don't say it like it's a bad thing, Kevin. Don't think of it as a punishment or a death sentence, but a chance to sharpen your skills and prove something to yourself. The ancient tomb is indeed full of danger, and all of the other forces that are also racing to obtain the divine weapon inside first will further complicate your mission. However, if you can come back alive and successful, the benefits and experience that you'll gain from it will surely be beyond your wildest dreams."
Wayne stroked the beard on his chin slowly, then added,
"According to the information that we've gathered, there's only one entrance to the ancient tomb, and it'll take another 10 days for it to open. To be safe, you should leave in 2 days."
"Got it, Dean Ford. Wait for my good news upon my return." Kevin nodded his head and quickly left the dean's office. As for Dalton, he stayed to study with Harley Shepard the entire night and only left the Healing Arts School the next afternoon. Given his upcoming mission, Kevin didn't stay idle during the next 2 days. First, he went to the Williams Company and called Adriana Wright to secretly find someone to help him write a will. Since Kevin couldn't guarantee that he would be able to walk out of the ancient tomb alive, He knew all too well the dangers that lurked there. He wanted to ensure that Lily would be taken care of in the event of his untimely death. After that, Kevin went to Corwin Tower and asked Troy Evans, Jordan Black, Justin Black, and Violet Sweeney to come along with him. With 4 other level 5 warriors in addition to him and Dalton, they could be considered a powerful lineup against the other major powers. Without alerting anyone else, Kevin and the others then left Chicago. They were about a 15-hour drive away from reaching the ancient tomb. Kevin knew those 15 hours would be the calmest and safest he'd face for many, many days. When Wayne Ford revealed that he wanted Kevin and Dalton Steele to go to the recently discovered ancient tomb to retrieve a divine weapon before anyone else could, Kevin immediately objected, after having just gone there and having barely made it out alive. Wayne argued that it wouldn't be easy for him to walk away given his moral compass. With the ancient tomb's entrance opening in 10 days, Kevin gave in and spent the next 2 days writing a last will for Lily in case something happened to him. Given that Mount Evans was located in a quiet part of Colorado, no one expected that the ancient tomb would appear in such a remote place. As such, when the major powers heard the news all of a sudden, they immediately made their moves, which set off a huge wave of incoming forces towards this quiet mountainside town.
Mr. Williams, where are we going?
Jordan Black couldn't help but ask in disappointment. As he looked around at the dense forest and tall mountains around him, he noted that this place was far different from what he had imagined. "We'll wait here." Kevin smiled and looked at the mountain looming in the distance. With the ancient tomb's entrance still days away from reopening, Kevin initially decided to stay here in place in order to prepare and strategize from a safe distance, away from the eyes and ears of others. "Mr. Williams, what is the ancient tomb like? Why are there so many people gathered around this area?" Violet Sweeney asked curiously. Along the way, they encountered a lot of experts from the other major powers. It was obvious to Violet and the others that theirs was not the only mission targeting the tomb and that the activity in this small town was strange. Normally, a gathering like this would either signify some kind of large-scale battle or entail some kind of grand event. And because they had to ensure the safety of ordinary citizens, they would usually choose a relatively remote place for everyone to meet. Fun isn't exactly a word that I would use to describe it, but if you're looking for a good challenge, I don't think this trip will let you down. Kevin slowly shook his head and replied. While they were talking, more than a dozen figures quickly approached them. They were all wearing outfits that sported the symbol of the Healing Arts School. When they arrived in front of Kevin and the others, these people quickly surrounded them. The leader was an old man who was about 60 to 70 years old, wearing a traditional robe compared to the others. He also had a goatee on his chin, which made him look like a sage among the young followers.
"Mr. Williams."
The old man looked at him carefully and asked, "Yes, that's me. Are you the forces from the Healing Arts School?" Kevin took 2 steps forward and asked calmly,
"My name is Gordon Maynard. I was ordered by the Dean to bring my men here to assist you. Now that you've arrived, my team shall be under your control."
The old man said this with a smile on his face, but there was also an air of mutual respect and seriousness of mission between them. If Kevin was an ordinary person, they would probably argue with each other over the matter of leadership. After all, Gordon Maynard vastly surpassed him in age and experience, so it wouldn't surprise anyone if he would look at a similar young man with disapproval. However, by now, everyone at the Healing Arts School knew that Kevin was different, as his reputation had already spread far and wide. Even the chief herbalist of the herbalism department, Lawrence Zimmerman, had left his post to make way for him. And when did either of the 2 deans ever not circle around him? Furthermore, Kevin had made a great contribution to the war against the Pinnacle, being one of the few people who survived the final battle against the Vanguard's younger generation. Mr. Maynard, you're being too formal. Dean Ford only asked me to come and help you and your team, so you must not let me command you, especially with your vast experience in these types of situations." Kevin replied politely without losing his pride.
"Then please go up the mountain with us. We've set a temporary camp there and most of our men are already waiting in the tent."
Gordon Maynard made an inviting gesture and moved half a step to the side. Kevin didn't hesitate too much and motioned for Dalton and the others to come along as they followed Gordon Maynard and his men up the mountain. However, when they arrived at the tent, they found that many of the Healing Arts School's warriors had already been injured. Some of them were lying on stretchers, while those who were in relatively better condition were sitting on the ground in a sad and exhausted state. "What's wrong, Mr. Maynard?" Kevin frowned slightly upon witnessing this scene. He couldn't understand what had happened.
"Mr. Williams, I'm not sure if you already know this, but several major powers were previously alerted of the ancient tomb's discovery. And while my co-leader Howard Torres and I were the first to arrive here with our men, it turns out that the camp we initially chose was the closest to the tomb."
Gordon sighed. His face was then full of guilt as he continued.
"But after the Union arrived, they kept trying to force us to move. Howard's fiery temper got the best of him, and he attacked them because of our disagreement. Unfortunately, he was no match for their two leaders in the end, leaving us with no choice but to retreat and set up camp here instead."
Dalton and Kevin's brows furrowed when they heard this. With the war against the Pinnacle having just ended, it seemed that the different schools of the Foundation had reverted back to their selfish pursuits. But even with this small matter of setting up camp, the Union's behavior was simply too overbearing. "Where is Mr. Torres now?" Kevin didn't reveal too much emotion. The members of the team from the Healing Arts School were curiously staring at Kevin. However, while their eyes were constantly scanning, their expressions were dazed and deadened. Their energies had been sapped by the ancient tomb and its powers even before they entered it. Their defeat outside its gates had left them at a loss.
"Mr. Williams, please follow me."
Gordon respectfully led the way across the tent. At the very end of it, an old man was lying on a temporary bed. His face was pale and there was still some blood at the corner of his mouth. His arm was wrapped in several layers of gauze and he seemed to be in a coma. Kevin first checked Howard Torres' pulse and ran through his spiritual energy across the old man's body to further examine his condition. He then shook his head and remarked, "Those two women are quite fierce."
"Kevin, it's not like you don't know it's because of that domineering and ruthless woman, Renee Silver. She always acts so high and mighty, pretending to be the righteous one among everyone. Since she has run into us again, we can't let her go so easily."
Dalton gritted his teeth and his eyes looked as if they were about to spurt out flames of anger as he spoke. The two of them had suffered a lot because of their previous fights against Renee Silver and the Union. At first, it seemed that they were almost forced into a corner by her when they weren't strong enough to fight back. Due to the animosity between Kevin and Renee, it even got to the point where she almost slaughtered the entire Steele family. As such, when both of their power bases advanced, Kevin and Dalton initially wanted to confront her and get their revenge. But they always found themselves busy with something else, and this dragged the matter on. Kevin momentarily brushed off Dalton's words. He first took out a pill from his pocket and fed it to Howard Torres. This should help him get better soon. Kevin then turned around and asked in a flat tone, "Mr. Maynard, do you know where the Union's camp is located?"
"Mr. Williams, why are you asking me this?"
Gordon suddenly had an ominous feeling.
"You're not going to rush over there to attack them, are you? With a more important mission ahead of us, I absolutely cannot allow you to risk your life in vain against them. As you know, the relationship between the Union and the Healing Arts School has already been somewhat strained for some time. Plus, most of our reinforcements haven't arrived yet. I think it's better to..."
"Mr. Maynard, you're overthinking the situation. I really don't care about the union, so you don't have to worry about me." Kevin straightened his waist and replied, "But since Dean Ford has sent me here to help you guys, how can I not consider defending the Healing Arts School's reputation?" Gordon Maynard was left speechless by Kevin's words. Although he was trying to persuade Kevin not to act rashly, he would have fought his way to the union's camp himself if his own power base was high enough. After all, how could he let the Healing Arts School's forces be trampled on so easily? However, he didn't expect Kevin to be so bold. Even though he had just arrived and hadn't settled down yet in camp, he was already looking to find trouble with others. In the biggest tent of the union's camp, 5 experts were sitting at the highest seats above the rest. "Can you sense the spiritual energy surrounding the ancient tomb? It shouldn't take long for it to be fully opened. When the time comes, we must be the ones to obtain the divine weapon inside." Renee Silver pointed out with a serious expression on her face.
"It won't be easy for us to succeed in warding off all the other major powers. We must make a detailed plan,"
one of the experts beside her replied. Renee and the others nodded their heads in agreement and began to come up with a strategy quickly. "The Grand Empress has been in training in isolation for many years and is about to come out of her seclusion. When the time comes, her power base will surely have advanced by leaps and bounds. As such, the divine weapon inside the tomb shall be our gift to her. This is the only way to not only maintain the stability of the Union, but to ensure that we shall be the leader of the 10 grade schools in the future." Renee resolutely patted the table as she gazed at everyone before her. Nothing less than an absolute victory over the other schools, and complete control thereafter, would satisfy ruthless Renee. Shortly after meeting Gordon Maynard, the leader of the Healing Arts School's team, Kevin and the others followed him to the team's camp, where they were surprised to find that most of the school's warriors had been injured in a surprise attack by the Union team. At the same time, Renee Silver had just stressed to her fellow Union leaders the importance of obtaining the divine weapon hidden inside the ancient tomb. This would serve as their gift to the Grand Empress, who she believed was about to come out of seclusion to reign supreme as the leader of the 10 great schools. Hearing her words, the eyes of the other Union warriors in the tent burned with a scorching light. The Grand Empress of the Union had kept herself mostly in isolation for many years as she focused relentlessly on developing her power base. If she was about to come out of seclusion soon, it would only prove one thing: that she had finally reached her goal and broken through to become a level 7 expert. Now that she had set a precedent, the rest of the Union would surely continue to follow her path. Over time, perhaps the organization would have a second, third, or even an endless stream of level 7 experts. By then, who else among the major powers would be able to match the Grand Empress's supremacy and the Union's collective strength? Suddenly, a loud noise came from outside the tent, causing the Union's leaders to instinctively furrow their brows. "What's going on? Didn't we tell the others to stay in their tents?" Vivian Myers asked as displeasure spread across her face. "I'll go outside and take a look." Renee Silver took a deep breath and quickly stood up to check what was going on outside. However, just as she walked out of the tent, several figures quickly charged toward her. If it wasn't for Renee reacting just in the nick of time to quickly dodge all of them, she surely would have been hit. "Who are you? How dare you try to start trouble in the Union's camp?" When Renee Silver saw the collapsed tent, her anger was swiftly ignited. "It's been a long time since we last saw you, Director Silver. How are you?" Kevin called out from afar. His casual air was intentional. He hoped to throw his enemy off guard. At first, it seemed that he was walking very slowly toward her, but in just a few seconds, he suddenly arrived in front of Renee. "Kevin!" Renee's pupils suddenly widened. She couldn't help but clench her fists in anger. "The one and only!" Kevin replied casually as he glanced at her indifferently. With a loud bang, the collapsed tent behind them broke into pieces as Renee stood on the spot with a cold expression on her face. At the same time, all the other warriors of the Union looked at Kevin with unfriendly expressions after being so rudely disturbed. Enchantress, this is Kevin Williams. He's the shameless piece of trash who was expelled from the Williams family in New York, Renee immediately revealed. Just then, the rest of the Union's warriors came over, holding their weapons tightly as they stared fiercely at Kevin and the others. Are the people of the Healing Arts School really in such a miserable state? How desperate of you to call for help from such a pathetic person! Renee cast a scornful glance at Gordon Maynard, who was standing off to the side.
For your information, Dean Ford had specially arranged for Mr. Williams to come here. Also, before tagging him as a shameless person, perhaps you should look at yourselves in the mirror and think about all the despicable things that you've done.
Gordon Maynard coldly fired back at her and turned his head away in disdain. It seems that you're here to seek revenge. Renee didn't waste any more words and directly got to the main point as she shifted her attention back to Kevin. So what if we are? Kevin straightened his back and took a step forward. This is the first location that the Healing Arts School has taken a liking to. It's only right for you to give it back to us and move along somewhere else. Why should we? Do you think that we're threatened at all by you? Renee sneered as she saw the Healing Arts School's reinforcements rushing over from near the base of the mountain. If it wasn't for Wayne Ford, do you think they would still be given the time of day? I'm giving you one last warning. Go back down the mountain immediately and return to your school. Don't force us to attack you again. Looks like I'll have to see how you're going to make a move this time around. Kevin put his hands behind his back and didn't say anything else. Enchantress! Renee's expression became even uglier. Knowing very well that she wasn't a match for Kevin, she couldn't afford to attack him directly. Instead, she had to place her hopes on Vivian Myers to teach him a lesson. Don't worry. I'll handle this, Vivian said. She was a ruthless woman who didn't like to talk much. When she took a step forward, the powerful spiritual energy of a level 6 expert instantly poured out from her body. Among the people of the Healing Arts School, the strongest among them was barely a level 5 expert. As such, when they felt this powerful pressure coming toward them, they were forced to take a step back, and a look of shock appeared on their faces. I don't really have any intention of becoming enemies with the Healing Arts School, so I hope that you all can just be a little bit self-aware and leave here as soon as possible. Vivian's words were filled with seriousness.
Such arrogance from this woman. Who does she think she is?
Troy Evans scoffed at her threat. Similarly, he also took a step forward and unleashed his own spiritual energy. Seeing this, Jordan Black, Justin Black, and Violet Sweeney also stepped forward and followed suit. The pressure of these 4 level 5 warriors was enough to cause a violent tremor across the ground beneath their feet. And under the influence of their combined power base, the surrounding air also seemed to be letting out piercing wails. How is this possible? Vivian's eyes widened in disbelief. Troy Evans and the other 3 figures' collective spiritual energy had forcefully stifled the pressure that Vivian Myers had just released. If it wasn't for the fact that the experts of the Union were supporting her with their own spiritual energy to help relieve some of the burdens, she would have been severely injured by this mighty force alone. By now, this commotion between the Union and the Healing Arts School had already attracted the attention of many people from the other major powers. When they caught sight of this and felt the heaviness in the air, all of them were shocked.
4 level 5 experts? Since when did the Healing Arts School have so many powerful warriors?
Someone exclaimed.
Although it's not a surprise for a school to have some hidden strength, to send out 4 level 5 warriors at the same time is certainly quite a shocking feat for them. Another added. Perhaps it's because they're all still so young and were only given the chance to showcase themselves now. But I can't help but think, if those 4 are already level 5 warriors, doesn't that mean that the power base of the 2 people in front of them is even higher? A third one wondered as he pointed toward Kevin and Dalton. With this scene going on for a few minutes, the other members of the Union could no longer withstand the pressure from Troy Evans and the others, forcing them to collapse to one knee and spit up blood. Kevin, do you really want to have a falling out with the Union over something so trivial? You should know that you're also representing the Healing Arts School right now. Vivian tried to scare Kevin in order to make them stop. Oh, so you do know that I represent the Healing Arts School? Kevin shook his head a few times and showed a mischievous smile. Since that's the case, you should return this location to us. Otherwise, how can I go back to our camp at this point? Don't be ridiculous. If we leave now, where else will we set up our camp? Besides, the Healing Arts School already has tents laid out not too far from here. There's no need for you to do this to us. Vivian's chest heaved up and down violently in exhaustion. Because of the ancient tomb, almost all of the major powers had formed a circle around it to set up camp. As such, Vivian Myers knew that if they gave up their current spot, it would be impossible for them to find a better place. Upon hearing this, Kevin's previously smiling face suddenly changed. He then shouted with a commanding voice, I'm telling you one last time, be gone. Otherwise, no one from the Union will be left alive. As his voice fell, his spiritual energy shot out from his body and pushed down on the Union like a crushing force. A 5th stage level 6 warrior? Vivian's face was as pale as a sheet of paper, and she almost fell to the ground in horror. Since the rest of the people from the Union weren't as strong as she, their bodies began to tremble uncontrollably, and their legs immediately went limp. And as they all helplessly fell to their knees, they simultaneously spit up blood. Seeing her junior members struggling like this, Vivian clenched her teeth tightly as she contemplated what to do. Deep down, she knew that Kevin's current power base was stronger than anyone else's present. But even if Vivian was powerful enough to withstand this herself, she still had to think about how to protect the rest of the Union from this fierce enemy. When Kevin asked Renee Silver to return the campsite location to the Healing Arts School, she called for Vivian Myers, who then used her spiritual energy to send a powerful burst of pressure towards the Healing Arts School's warriors. Troy Evans and the former Vanguard experts unleashed their own spiritual energy to counter her attack, and Kevin released his own spiritual energy as a final warning. It was obvious Kevin's powers could easily destroy the Union. Although Vivian Myers didn't know how Kevin had achieved this, the strength he displayed alone was enough to suppress all the people of the Union. Moreover, he also had the help of 4 mysterious level 5 warriors. Under their combined energy, it would only take a few more minutes before all of the Union's junior members would succumb to the pressure being applied to them. Let's go. Vivian Myers begrudgingly uttered these words with great difficulty. Only then did Kevin feel satisfied with the result. He then waved his hand to Troy Evans and the others, and all of them withdrew their powerful pressure at the same time. Under the cheers of the Healing Arts School's members, the people of the Union conceded the campsite location and left dejectedly like little kids leaving the playground after recess was over. With the Healing Arts School regaining their original camp spot, Gordon Maynard sneered at the Union's members as they walked out. However, the way he looked at Kevin not only showed some respect for defending their team, but also a strong sense of fear after witnessing just how powerful he was. Mr. Maynard, can you tell me about the ancient tomb now? Kevin found a place to sit down and watch the people of the Healing Arts School happily set up their tents at their original location. Surely, Mr. Williams. Please look over there.
Gordon Maynard pointed to a section on his left.
The entrance to the ancient tomb should be somewhere around there. The spiritual energy inside hasn't been completely released yet, but it emits a rainbow-colored light every 5 hours. However, the light is getting fainter and fainter, indicating there's only a small window to enter once it opens. According to the information we have, we still don't know which ancient warrior's tomb it is. However, looking at the colorful spiritual energy that's being emitted, along with the heaviness of the air at the entrance of the tomb, the ancient record suggests that it should contain an ancient divine weapon called the Night Sword. Gordon gazed into the distance at the entrance of the tomb, and his eyes were burning with passion. After all, who wouldn't want their power base to increase by another level by embarking on this mission? Furthermore, who could determine how powerful the divine weapon inside was? What did you say? The Night Sword? Kevin's eyes widened in shock. The Night Sword is an ancient divine weapon? This was the first time that Kevin had heard exactly what he and his team were seeking for the school. That's right, Mr. Williams. Didn't you hear me?
Gordon squinted his eyes and asked back. The moment he heard this piece of information, Kevin wanted to turn around and leave this place immediately. Was this a joke? The Night Sword had been on his back this entire time, and it was previously bought from an antique store. At that time, he had spent $800,000 to obtain it, and Kevin could still clearly remember that the antique appraiser was looking at him as if he was an idiot for throwing all that money away on a rusty old antique sword. Are these two old men trying to trick me? Kevin bit his lips and thought to himself. With the Night Sword already in his possession, didn't that mean that there was no divine weapon to be found inside the ancient tomb? If so, then what else was he even staying here for? Mr. Maynard, have you heard about the heavenly floral grass? When Kevin asked this question, he suddenly had a bad feeling. As expected, Gordon Maynard was stunned for a moment, then immediately shook his head.
No, Mr. Williams. What does that have to do with the ancient tomb?
Kevin closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He then slowly exhaled and tried to calm his nerves. Nothing, just a random thought. Kevin tried to feign a smile as his left eye twitched ever so slightly.
Mr. Williams, when are we going to try our luck at entering the tomb?
Gordon asked respectfully. Let's wait for a little while, Kevin casually replied. Even if he no longer had any reason to go inside, Kevin still wanted to enter the tomb today. Having already been there recently, he figured that he could still find something useful to bring back. However, Kevin had decided that he would also have a stern chat with those two old men after he returned. Why don't the 6 of us get a head start and find a different route in order to get there? Otherwise, if we start from here and bring everyone else with us, we'll definitely become live targets when the others catch us approaching. Justin Black finally shared his thoughts on the matter.
But this mountain has several sections that are long and winding. With the exact location of the ancient tomb a mystery to everyone, where should we begin? How are we sure that we won't get lost? And what if we meet other forces along the way?
Jordan Black said. He didn't dare to act rashly. Then we will carefully search one section at a time. Kevin's eyes were almost glowing with excitement. The situation in the ancient tomb had previously exceeded his imagination. Under the nourishment of such dense spiritual energy, there were definitely countless natural herbs that could be grown in its environment. Since the herbs that he obtained from the Alliance's headquarters had almost been used up, Kevin could replenish his reserves and discover new ingredients this time around. Given this, Kevin and the others quietly slipped away from the rest of the group and quickly traversed through the dense forest. From a distance, no one could detect any trace of them as their figures were fully hidden by all the trees that surrounded them. Everyone, be careful. Stay alert and prepare to face the unexpected at all times. Kevin walked in the middle and looked around vigilantly for any possible threats. At the moment, the trees were too dense, making it much harder to scan the ground for plants than it had just been a few moments before.
What the hell? Kevin, look! How can there be such a giant mushroom?
Dalton Steele suddenly shouted as he pointed to the ground to his side. Even among all the thick, dense plants, the huge mushroom stood out. Everyone looked over and couldn't help but be stunned. While an ordinary mushroom wasn't considered a rare herb, the one that grew in front of them at this time was quite different. The round-shaped mushroom was the size of a car's front hood, and it was about 12 inches thick. Its entire body had a purplish-red color, and there were some blood-red spots all over it. Aside from this, the mushroom seemed to be emitting a faint glow.
My God! I've seen many special herbs that Apex Island offered to the Pinnacle, but I've never seen such a giant mushroom.
Troy Evans gulped in disbelief. I finally remember what this is. Kevin slapped his head hard. It's called the purple snake mushroom. It's a superior herb, but the secret book never mentioned that it could grow so big.
Who cares if it's big or not? Let's take it and cut it into pieces.
Jordan Black excitedly took out his sword and walked quickly toward the purple snake mushroom.
Be careful,
Troy shouted. Wait a minute. Kevin yelled at almost the same time in an attempt to stop Jordan. I've learned this particular lesson the hard way. Any place where a spiritual object is found, there will surely be a deadly poison within 100 feet or so. As Kevin said this, he had already slowly pulled out his night dagger. If they were in the midst of a battle, no matter whether it was an open spear or a hidden arrow, one could always guard against it. However, poison and other things along those lines were often impossible to guard against. Kevin then thought back to the time when he and Brett Stewart were trapped in Corwin Tower with the deadly green snake poison. Aside from this, didn't the tiny insects and creatures of the ancient tomb also have this poisonous venom?
Mr. Williams, what did you just say? I don't understand what you mean by that.
Jordan scratched the back of his head and asked blankly. Bro, why are you so stupid? Mr. Williams' words were very, very clear. He said that this mushroom is a powerful herb that can cure someone from the effects of deadly poisons. Justin slapped the back of Jordan's head while he shook his own.
Really? Now I get it. In that case, I will proceed and take it for us immediately.
Jordan smiled and walked over even more resolutely. Hearing their conversation, Kevin and Dalton covered their foreheads with their hands. Were his words that vague to cause a misunderstanding, or were these brothers just not very quick on the uptake to begin with? When Jordan Black was about 10 steps away from the purple snake mushroom, a rustling sound suddenly came from the trees around them. Everyone, be on guard. Kevin's expression immediately became serious. As such, Troy Evans and Violet Sweeney quickly had their backs to each other, while Kevin and Dalton also looked around vigilantly. Meanwhile, Jordan also quickly reacted and channeled his spiritual energy. His body then emitted the same faint black and white glow as his brother Justin's. In a flash, Jordan realized that Kevin was right. There was a deadly poison nearby, and now it might be too late to avoid it. Despite feeling deceived by Wayne Ford, Kevin still wanted to return to the tomb in hopes of obtaining some herbs. While searching, the group came upon a purple snake mushroom which Kevin knew could be poisonous. However, Justin and Jordan Black misunderstood him and thought that it was an antidote instead. But just as Jordan was about to retrieve the mushroom, a rustling sound prompted Kevin and the others to be on high alert. The noise around them grew louder and louder, and suddenly more than a dozen black shadows attacked them at lightning speed. Let me handle this with my 1,000 swords technique, Justin Black shouted out loudly as he drew his sword. In a flash, he then waved his sword fervently while running in circles around the group. This created an illusion as if he was attacking with 1,000 swords that struck these shadows from all directions. As a result, almost every black shadow quickly retreated into the darkness. However, one of them, which had been attacked with fierce momentum, fell to the ground midway after being struck by Justin Black's sword. At this moment, Kevin and the others approached the black shadow and finally saw what it was clearly. It was a dark green snake that closely resembled the color and appearance of a harmless plant vine. In fact, if it hadn't moved and stayed wrapped around a tree, they would have mistaken it as an actual vine.
If I'm not mistaken, isn't that a vine snake? I can't believe that this type of snake actually exists here.
Troy Evans was stunned for a moment. Then he shouted out in shock.
You know what it is?
Dalton Steele couldn't help but shudder at the sight of its dead carcass, as he wasn't used to seeing something so ugly.
What makes it so special compared to other snakes? Yes, as the name suggests, the vine snake is an extremely poisonous snake with a vine-like appearance. Although they don't attack much differently from your average snake, their appearance makes them highly dangerous given that they can disguise themselves in plain sight almost perfectly. Moreover, the poison contained in their venom isn't something that experts like us can take lightly. A vine snake's bite can kill even a level 7 warrior.
Troy warned with a serious expression. No one at or below level 7 can resist it? Kevin was also shocked. He didn't expect this creature to be so powerful.
Back on Apex Island, I remember a time when there were only 1 or 2 vine snakes in the forest. As such, no one paid any real attention to them. But in just half a year's time, the number of vine snakes increased dramatically for some reason. In the end, they ate all the other creatures that lived there. People weren't exempt from this either. Whether it was someone who had accidentally entered or was simply bold enough to visit, no one would be able to walk out alive.
A look of fear emerged in Jordan Black's eyes.
Because of this, the Pinnacle gave the order to seal off the entire forest, and despite all the rare treasures that were in there, that place had become so synonymous with death that people would shrink back even at the thought of passing through.
When he heard this, Kevin could see that the expressions of Violet Sweeney and the others from Apex Island had also changed. It seemed that they were all afraid of this vine-like monster.
Are you guys joking? Is this thing really that powerful? And if so, how in the world did it get here to Colorado?
Dalton still didn't believe them. He then arrogantly picked up a fallen tree branch from the side and squatted on the ground to poke the dead snake's head.
Be careful!
A cold light suddenly flew out from Violet Sweeney's hands. The snake's head, which had been lying on the ground, suddenly jumped up and fiercely shot out toward Dalton's neck. Fortunately, Violet Sweeney had made a move just in time as her dagger pierced through the snake's head and firmly nailed it back to the ground.
As you can see, the vine snake remains extremely aggressive even minutes after its death. Although the power of its venom will be much less after its body has been destroyed, it can still cause the human body to rot.
Troy looked at Dalton with some annoyance for being so foolish.
The most terrifying thing is that the vine snake has always lived in groups, making the probability of them appearing alone very low. And since we encountered more than 10 black shadows earlier, it can only prove one thing.
After saying this, Troy Evans suddenly stopped talking. At the same time, Kevin also realized the seriousness of the matter, and he couldn't help but frown.
What is it?
Dalton still didn't understand. What he means is that there are still a lot more vine snakes around here. Kevin turned around and exclaimed, "We're surrounded!" As his voice fell, countless red lights suddenly appeared in the surrounding dark forest. There were also rustling sounds everywhere, as if to warn them that hundreds or even thousands of poisonous snakes were crawling their way. Given this, Kevin and the others quickly went into a formation, not daring to leave any gap in between as they leaned against each other's backs.
What do we do now?
Dalton tightly gripped the fusion hammers in his hands as he surrounded his body with spiritual energy.
How do we defeat these things? The defensive capabilities of the vine snake itself are extremely low. As such, a normal dagger or sword is already enough to kill it.
Troy's forehead was already covered in cold sweat.
However, what we do have to watch out for is its speed. Vine snakes are just too fast, and they have an absolute advantage over us in numbers at the moment. Generally speaking, even when a pack of hungry wolves encounters them, they can only run away as they would much rather starve than risk becoming their prey.
Just then, Kevin suddenly noticed something. The light emitted by the purple snake mushroom off to the side was getting stronger and stronger, as if it had discovered something that could resonate with it.
Are you saying that you want us to give up and just let them eat us?
Dalton glanced at Troy Evans unhappily.
You don't seem to understand a single thing, do you? My point is that if we want to stand a chance against them, we have to be extra careful.
Troy's expression didn't change at all. He stood still and looked around vigilantly.
Besides, vine snakes don't even need to eat your body in order to kill you. As long as you are bitten by them, your entire body will rot and die from their poisonous venom. What the hell? How is that supposed to reassure us? And how can you tell us this with such a blank expression?
Dalton was about to go crazy.
I don't want to die from letting their poison go all through my body. I might as well let them eat me alive.
At that moment, more and more vine snakes slithered toward Kevin and the others, and in just a few minutes, they were completely surrounded by them. Suddenly, there was a commotion among the bed of vine snakes. An opening appeared in the middle as one of them entered. This particular vine snake looked like a 1,000-year-old tree vine and slowly moved toward them. Its size was much thicker and longer than the others, spanning about 30 feet in length, and it also kept dripping its sticky purple venom all over the ground as it slithered around.
How did you get in here? This place has been closed off for many years.
While the giant vine snake itself didn't speak, a hoarse and slow voice seemed to echo from all around them. For a moment, Troy Evans and the others were shocked. They had never seen a vine snake this big on Apex Island. Moreover, where was that strange voice coming from? It seemed as though it was coming from inside their own heads, as though they were being hypnotized somehow.
I'm the ruler of this place, and these vine snakes are all under my control, but I have no intentions of harming anyone who doesn't offend me. I promise to spare your lives if you leave this place now,
the voice explained slowly. Kevin took a deep breath. He finally understood one thing. At first, he was wondering why the spiritual energy was so dense in this place if it only nurtured ordinary plants. Now, with so many vine snakes surrounding them, it seemed that other wild beasts had thrived here as well. At that moment, Dalton suddenly took a few steps forward and asked sternly,
If I understand correctly, are you really willing to let us go?
Dalton's words made Kevin frown. He really admired Dalton's honesty, but even if this mysterious force really wanted to let them go, he shouldn't have asked the question out loud. However, what the voice said next shocked everyone. Kevin, Dalton, and their team had just realized they were attacked by a vine snake who had the powers to kill even a level 7 warrior. When more snakes loomed, their leader, a giant vine snake who was able to speak through a mysterious echo, told Kevin that the vine snakes had no intentions of harming anyone and would spare their lives if they left immediately. When Dalton tried to clarify in confusion whether this voice was really willing to let them go, what it said next shocked everyone.
Yes, I'm willing to let you go, but I have one condition. Leave this mountain as soon as possible after exiting these woods, and don't covet any treasures within the ancient tomb.
Hearing this exchange, Troy Evans placed his hands on the top of his head in disbelief, desperately trying to quiet the voice that seemed to be coming from inside his head.
I'm afraid that it's impossible since we've already come this far.
Dalton raised his eyebrows and continued.
It would be wise for you not to become enemies with us.
Dalton then added, looking around him, unsure exactly where the voice was coming from.
I can also tell you 2 other things. First, even before coming to the tomb today, there were already others who had previously entered it. What if they had already found your so-called treasure? Second, there are still a lot of people not far from here who haven't entered the tomb yet. So what if you managed to trap and kill our team here in this forest? It's just a waste of time, as you'd only be giving even more people a chance to take advantage and steal your treasures.
Kevin frowned. Since it was also his first time dealing with these vine snakes, he had no idea what to expect from these monsters, so Dalton's confidence shocked him. Besides, just moments ago, wasn't Dalton the one who had been the most afraid of being poisoned or eaten alive by these vine snakes? Kevin didn't often question Dalton's bravery, but in this case, he might be foolish to anger an enemy as deadly as the vine snakes. As Kevin had expected, this seemed to have infuriated the giant vine snake as it angrily hissed at them and stuck out its long tongue, causing droplets of thick liquid venom to come out of its mouth. Meanwhile, the countless vine snakes around them moved at the same time and slowly approached. Troy Evans had mentioned earlier that the toxicity of the vine snake's venom was very strong. As such, even Kevin's power base wouldn't be able to withstand a slight touch, let alone being bitten by them.
What do you think you're doing?
Dalton suddenly took out a bottle from his pocket.
Do you know what this is? This is the most precious product in the Foundation. With just this small bottle alone, I can turn hundreds of miles worth of this land into a sea of fire. And all I have to do is drop this bottle onto the ground below me. Therefore, if you plan to harm any of my brothers and sisters here with these snakes, you have to consider whether you can do so faster than I can release this poison.
Hearing this, not only did the vine snakes abruptly stop, but even Kevin and Troy were stunned. They looked at each other in disbelief, unable to figure out what kind of trick Dalton was trying to pull.
If you don't believe me, why don't you command these snakes to come at us and find out?
Dalton waved the bottle in his hand. However, the blood-red eyes of the giant vine snake revealed a trace of worry. After furiously sticking out its tongue twice, the thousands of snakes that had surrounded Kevin and the others slowly retreated. It seemed that these snakes were still afraid of being burned to death. At the moment, it seemed that whatever was behind the powerful voice echoing around them couldn't figure out whether what Dalton Steele had just claimed was true or not. However, it didn't have the courage to gamble. Although the level of the vine snake's venom was intense, they didn't possess any power base. Therefore, while the number of things that could surpass the potency of a vine snake's venom could be counted on one hand, the snakes themselves were no different from any ordinary creature that wouldn't be able to survive a fire like the one Dalton had described. After visibly hesitating for a long time, the giant vine snake let out a long hiss before quickly slithering away. In less than 30 seconds, it had completely disappeared along with all the other snakes.
What an idiot! Did that stupid snake really believe what I said?
Dalton couldn't help but chuckle. Although he seemed to be speaking very casually on the surface the entire time, the back of his shirt was actually soaked through with sweat. Dalton, what on earth did you threaten them with just now? Kevin walked up quickly and took the bottle from him. He looked at it carefully. What is this red liquid solution?
To be honest, it's actually just some wine that I didn't get to finish the other night. I didn't want to throw it away, so I transferred the rest of the wine into this container. I didn't expect it to come in handy today as a prop.
So you were just bluffing this whole time with red wine? Kevin's eyes widened in shock. He didn't expect anyone to be able to pull off such a clever trick, but if anyone could do it, it was Dalton. Still, it was totally different from his usual tactics.
Wasn't there any other way to drive those snakes away? Didn't Troy say that their venom is extraordinarily toxic? Therefore, I thought that instead of being passive and seeing what happened, I might as well take the initiative to threaten and scare them off instead. Although it was admittedly a huge risk, isn't there an old saying that goes, "Wealth comes from danger"? Dalton proudly boasted.
Without waiting for Kevin to say anything, Jordan Black walked up and wrapped his arm around Dalton Steele's shoulder.
Dalton, I always thought that you were a clever guy, but now it seems that you're also quite brave and resourceful. I'm really starting to like you.
Jordan Black laughed and praised him.
It's too early to celebrate. After all, we're only about to enter the ancient tomb, and we don't know what will happen after that.
Troy crossed his arms in front of his chest and remarked in a serious tone. Meanwhile, Kevin didn't say anything else. When Dalton glanced back at him, he let out a long sigh and patted his shoulder gently. There were some things that the two of them didn't need to talk about, but it didn't mean that Dalton didn't understand. Deep down, Dalton knew that he hadn't been much of a help to Kevin as of late. On the other hand, Kevin didn't hesitate to spare any of his time or resources to help him. As such, although there was no need for thanks between brothers, Dalton had always firmly remembered Kevin's kindness in his heart. And today he felt good to be the one to step up and help Kevin out of this deadly situation. Due to their unexpected encounter with the vine snakes, Kevin and the others had veered away from their original plan to get a head start on everyone else and search for the ancient tomb's entrance section by section. Instead, they chose to observe the rest of their competition in the shadows, as the people of the other major powers also started to make moves one after another. As they all approached the ancient tomb, some organizations even started fighting each other on the way for small profits and bragging rights. Treating this place as a battlefield, they didn't hesitate to use this opportunity to showcase their abilities in order to prove which team had better skills and was more prepared.
I can't help but think that I really underestimated the strength of these other schools in the past. I've now begun to suspect that it was really their intention to deceive others by their actions on the surface.
Dalton, who was standing on a tree branch, narrowed his eyes as he looked at the scene not far away. Dalton's right. Although I don't know for sure how strong they really are, I can clearly feel that Jeffrey Bowie and the other leaders' power bases are all at least at the advanced stage of level 6. If so, then why have they been hiding their true strength all this time? Could it be that there are some secrets within the great powers that can't be told to others? Kevin muttered to himself while he was deep in thought. Ever since he started studying at the Healing Arts School, Kevin had come into contact with the different deans or the higher-ups of many other schools and organizations within the great powers, such as Renee Silver and Violet Myers of the Union, as well as Paul Vaughn and Jeffrey Bowie. However, the power bases these people displayed had always given him a sense that they weren't worthy of their distinguished reputation. If they were only at roughly the same power base as him, how could these leaders survive at the hands of the formidable Myriads or the Mighty Alliance? It was only today that Kevin finally understood what was going on. With the weakest of these leaders being level 5 experts, the rest of them were just waiting for the right opportunity to unleash their full power in front of everyone. At the same time, in the Salix Leaf complex in Chicago, Lily was sitting on the living room sofa and drinking some coffee. With Rachel Collins beside her, the two of them were catching up and chatting about different matters. "It seems that so many things happened while I was in a coma," Lily said as she was filled with mixed emotions. "I'm just glad that you're okay now. Anyway, I don't know the identity of the person who came to the hospital that day. But when I heard that there was a way to save you and told Kevin about it, he immediately brought Dalton with him and left Chicago in order to obtain some rare flower." Rachel had also heard about what happened between Kevin and Lily, so she wanted to be the peacemaker between the two of them. "Is he really with Phoebe Anderson?" Lily suddenly asked dejectedly. "Lily, don't be so negative. You can't believe everything you hear. As your best friend, I can see that Kevin loves you very much. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone to such great lengths just to save you. Rachel earnestly gave her opinion on the matter. Although I know that Kevin and Phoebe are close friends, I can assure you that there's nothing romantic going on between them. Kevin may not be the perfect husband, but despite his shortcomings, he only has eyes for one woman in his life, and that person is you. Rachel added, "Besides, let me tell you something. Kevin isn't just an ordinary man. He used to be the young heir of the Williams family in New York. One day he was thrown out of the family and he came to Chicago where he met you. Despite this, he never let his past dictate his future. And now that he's made a strong comeback, Kevin has risen to heights he never would have attained back in New York, all without the help of his wealthy family. He may often get quite busy these days, but don't you see that he's doing this all for you? Kevin is extremely grateful for your love and patience these past 3 years, and now he just wants to make sure that he can return the favor by giving you a comfortable life." Despite Rachel's best efforts, Lily still didn't say anything. Although she was shocked by Kevin's wealthy and powerful background, she knew that it was impossible for her to share her husband with other women. But with Kevin and her mother saying two completely different things, which of them should she believe? At the same time, neither of them noticed that Dorothy, who was hiding on the stairs, had been eavesdropping on their conversation this entire time.
"So, Kevin is the rightful heir to the Williams family's empire? How is this possible? If he's not originally from Chicago, then if I go to the Williams family in New York to introduce myself as his mother-in-law, wouldn't I be in a position to get a lot of money from them?"
As she thought more about this, Dorothy suddenly became excited. Even her breathing became more rapid. "Lily, you have to listen to me. Kevin is a good man, and that's very hard to come by. With his current status, he could get any woman if he wanted to, but he's chosen to stay faithful and loyal because he truly loves you." After saying that, Rachel glanced toward the upstairs. She was afraid that Dorothy would hear what she was going to say next. After making sure that Dorothy wasn't coming downstairs, she then whispered softly into Lily's ear. "Besides, if Kevin really didn't love you anymore, then how else could he tolerate Aunt Dorothy's constant insults? Also, you should know very well how the Jones family treated him with disdain for these past few years. Are you really going to let go of such a loving husband just because your mother suspects him of cheating without even a shred of evidence?" Rachel added, "Think about it from another perspective. If you really decide to give up on Kevin, wouldn't it be benefiting Phoebe Anderson? We both know that she's madly in love with Kevin, and she would want nothing more than for you to divorce him." Common sense coming from her best friend made Lily rethink how she viewed Kevin, her marriage, and her mother's claims that Kevin was cheating on her while she lay in a hospital in a coma. Despite Rachel Collins' best efforts to prove that Kevin truly loved Lily, Lily remained unconvinced that he and Phoebe Anderson were really just close friends. Rachel then told Lily not to let go of Kevin just because of Dorothy's accusations, pointing out how he had chosen to stay with her amidst his current change in status, and Dorothy's continued insults. After that, she also brought up how divorcing Kevin would only benefit Phoebe, who they both knew was madly in love with him. Upon hearing this, Lily couldn't help but tighten her grip on the edges of her clothes. Despite her present doubts about his character, she really didn't want to divorce Kevin. After being married to him for more than 3 years, she still loved him just as much as the day they said their vows, if not more. When they first met, Lily was aware that Kevin's life was in dire straits. However, he had always been kind and caring toward her in spite of his shortcomings. It was because of this that she decided to take a chance and agree to marry him, even though her mother had objections to their relationship. As expected, Kevin was often bullied and ridiculed by the Jones family and other people for years due to his lowly status. But now that he had suddenly become an unreachable existence for most people, everyone who had looked down upon Kevin in the past was now at his mercy. At the same time, his new status had brought with it several enemies, and as a result, she couldn't help but feel conflicted about supporting and celebrating his newfound success. After all, it was always her dream to see Kevin rise just like this. But now that it had come true, Lily suddenly felt that things were somewhat better back when he was simply a regular person. At least Kevin had always been by her side at that time, unlike now when he was off and away on long business trips, not knowing what he was up to or who he was with. Seeing that Lily had fallen silent and was clearly bothered by many thoughts, a faint smile appeared on the corner of Rachel's mouth as she took her hands and held them. "Lily, I'm not trying to scare you, but now that Kevin has many ties not only in Chicago but also in Detroit and St. Louis, I'm sure there isn't a family in those cities that wouldn't want their unmarried daughter to have a relationship with Kevin if he was available. Despite this, Kevin remains loyal to you, so instead of pushing him away, you'd better hold him tightly in your arms." Rachel's eyes were filled with some envy. If Kevin was her husband, Rachel would definitely feel like the luckiest woman in the world. Aside from being a devoted partner, he was arguably the most powerful man in Chicago. How could she let go of such a catch? "If he wants to leave me for another woman, then so be it. I won't waste my time and effort trying to tie him up with a rope," Lily uttered angrily, but her heart was still full of worry deep down. "Lily, don't let your emotions cloud your judgment. Think about how much Kevin loves you. Remember how the Jones family used to treat him before? Did he ever take that out on you?" Rachel really wanted her best friend to come to her senses. What kind of person would push away someone like Kevin? Suddenly, Rachel vigilantly looked toward the stairs again and heaved a sigh of relief before continuing. "Lily, listen to me. Don't get too wrapped up in Aunt Dorothy's words. As her daughter, you should know very well what kind of person she is. Wait until Kevin comes back so that you can talk to him about whatever's bothering you. But also, make sure to give him a chance to explain himself and ease your concerns." Upon hearing this, Lily didn't say anything else, but her eyes began to well up with tears. At the same time, back at Mount Evans, Kevin and the others had finally arrived at the huge cave entrance of the ancient tomb. Although the sun was hanging above their heads, they couldn't feel any warmth at this point. They even had to use the spiritual energy in their bodies to resist the cold air coming from the cave.
"Mr. Williams, what should we do now?"
Jordan Black frowned and kept shaking his head. Unfortunately, the ancient tomb seemed to be closed as there was no light coming from the cave's entrance at this time. Instead, it was only enveloped by darkness. "That shouldn't be the case." Kevin shook his head and murmured. "With the eagle-shaped mountain region visible from this vantage point, we should be in the right spot. But why is the ancient tomb's entrance closed? Does the sunlight have to shine on it at a specific angle, or do we have to wait until midnight like before?"
What?
Troy Evans and the others looked at each other blankly when they heard what Kevin said. Because they didn't understand what he had meant at all, they could only stare at each other and wait for Kevin to enlighten them.
Kevin, explain it to us clearly.
Dalton also urged him in a puzzled manner. While he had already gone with Kevin to the ancient tomb before, he also couldn't figure out why they couldn't enter at the moment. "Take a look at the shape of that mountain range." Kevin pointed to the left and continued. "It looks like an eagle, right? According to legend, this region will thrive as a prosperous hub for nurturing extraordinary talents in the future. As for whether this will help drive humanity forward or destroy it, that depends on whose hands it shall eventually fall under."
How can this region be so powerful that it can determine the fate of humanity?
Dalton couldn't help but wonder. Jordan Black, Justin Black, and the others looked at Kevin with serious expressions. As former Vanguard members, they had also heard about a legendary mountain region being vaguely mentioned in passing back on Apex Island. While only the higher-ups of the Pinnacle knew the exact details, they knew that it was one of the main reasons why the Pinnacle wanted to return in the first place. What they didn't expect was that Kevin was not only aware of this legend, but he had actually managed to track down its location. It's true that it's powerful, but our problem right now is that we can't seem to enter this tomb. Take a look at the direction that the sun is moving. Kevin turned his body sideways and looked into the distance. The others followed him and looked at him. Violet Sweeney suddenly remarked, "It's heading toward the direction we came from."
Is there a problem with that, Mr. Williams? The direction of the mountain range was naturally formed. Furthermore, there was no possibility that any human could change the direction of the mountain.
Troy Evans asked with a puzzled expression on his face. The direction of the mountain range cannot be changed, but that doesn't mean that humans can't change anything else. Kevin took a deep breath, pointed at the tomb's entrance, and said with a serious expression, "When this tomb was built around this cave, the entrance was specifically set here for a reason. As you can see, the surrounding walls of the cave block the path of the sun or the moon's light. What do you think will happen if its path is suddenly blocked?"
"The tomb will remain dark and cold inside."
Jordan Black was the first to react and replied, "That's right. The ancient tomb's entrance only reveals itself once it's illuminated by either the sun or the moon's light, and this happens rarely in order to protect the treasures inside. Moreover, inside the tomb, the conditions are pretty harsh. As such, whatever beasts or creatures that have been staying inside, their personality has become even more ferocious and brutal, out of hunger and seclusion. Thus, if we dare to rashly enter the cave and disturb its peace, we'll never make it out alive." Kevin let out a long breath and added, "That being said, we have to be strategic about entering the cave once it opens." Before the others could react, a series of air-piercing sounds suddenly came from nearby, and in the blink of an eye, more than 10 figures arrived in front of them. The one in the lead was none other than Jake Morris.
"So, you've just been hiding here after searching for the ancient tomb for so long?"
Jake Morris taunted coldly as he arrogantly crossed his arms in front of his chest.
"Kevin, this place shall become your burial ground today as well."
Jordan Black and the others were shocked when they heard this. Where did this person come from? Did he just say that he wanted to kill Kevin? What a coincidence, Jake. I didn't expect to meet you here again after so long. How have you been? Kevin waved his hand and greeted Jake Morris. Jake Morris and the people behind him didn't know what Kevin was up to. Jake was at a loss for words with his reaction.
You?
I'm fine too, Jake. Kevin quickly interrupted Jake Morris. He then warmly spread his arms and quickly walked forward to give him a passionate hug.
What the? Kevin, let go of me!
Jake was stunned for a moment before he came back to his senses.
Don't you dare take my threat lightly. No matter what happens, I intend to kill you today.
Jake Morris stared at Kevin with a cold look in his eyes. Previously, he had been under the orders of his family to go to the Midwest to retrieve the Power Pills formula from Kevin. However, despite his best efforts in having made moves in both St. Louis and Chicago, he failed to obtain anything of value from Kevin. In the end, he even provoked the Reaper Squad, which caused some of his family members to develop a negative impression of him. In addition, Calvin Morris had just made a great contribution to the recently concluded war against the Pinnacle, which had further affected his prestige and status within his family when compared to his brother. Therefore, the first thing Jake Morris did when he heard of the ancient tomb's discovery was to volunteer himself to obtain the divine weapon inside for the Morris family. This was because he figured that, with all of the major powers competing against one another, Kevin wouldn't dare to miss out on such a big opportunity either. As such, he recruited a few experts once again from his mother to come along with him for this mission. In fact, when Kevin confronted the Union earlier, Jake Morris had already been observing him in secret. He deliberately chose not to make a move on him at that time. Instead, he wanted to get rid of Kevin in the ancient tomb with his own hands. By doing so, he would not only be able to prove his competence to his family by successfully obtaining the divine weapon, but also redeem himself in their eyes by killing Kevin and getting the pill formula from him. Jake, don't be so anxious. I know you want to kill me, but wasn't our previous conflict just a small matter? Let bygones be bygones." Kevin ignored Jake Morris's attitude. He then reached out his hand and put it on Jake Morris's shoulder as if they were brothers. Kevin's attempt to turn the tables on Jake only made Jake more intent to kill his enemy. Kevin realized the ancient tomb's entrance only revealed itself when directly hit by either the sun or moon's light, which gave Kevin time to warn the others about the cave's harsh conditions as well as the ferocious beasts and creatures inside. Jake Morris arrived with his men and declared his intent to kill Kevin. However, Kevin stunned everyone by hugging Jake as if they were brothers. And when Jake reiterated that his threat shouldn't be taken lightly, Kevin brushed off their previous conflict as a small matter. "Jake, I have something for you that's more important than killing me right now. Take a look at the cave over there. I've already observed that it seems to be filled with a rich amount of spiritual energy. As such, there must be countless treasures inside the ancient tomb," Kevin said, raising his eyebrows respectfully. He then pointed over to his right and continued, "I know that my strength alone isn't enough to survive inside. After all, I'm nothing like you, who comes from a big family with vast resources. The experts around you are all very powerful. Furthermore, your own power base is at the peak of excellence. That being said, I hope to go inside with you once the tomb opens. Please, take this offer into consideration, and let me live for a little while longer." In Kevin's mind, he didn't want to fight with the people of the Morris family at the moment. Instead, he figured that they could actually be of use to him. Thus, regardless of the consequences later on, he wanted to send Jake and his men first into the ancient tomb in order to act as a shield for them. Given this, Kevin had to come up with a way to convince Jake Morris to agree to his plan by giving him an offer that he couldn't refuse. And by trying to inflate Jake's ego, Kevin hoped that all his flattery would work. Otherwise, it would be a waste of his words if this only ended up with Jake disregarding Kevin's offer. "Jake, think about it carefully. With so many people from the other major powers also here on this mountain at this time, everyone except you would be returning empty-handed if you managed to obtain all the treasure inside. If that happens, won't that further prove that you're better than everyone else? Without a doubt, this will allow your reputation to rise to greater heights. And when the time comes, how will your good-for-nothing brother Calvin still be able to compete with you for the position of the future head of the Morris family? Actually, you don't know this, but ever since we parted ways last time, I haven't been able to sleep at night thinking how my eyes failed to see your greatness. How could I offend such a powerful and influential figure like you? Therefore, if you don't mind, Jake, I hope to follow you around like a little brother from now on. If you accept me as your protege, it would really be a huge honor for me to learn and be guided by someone like you. In return, I promise to be completely loyal to you." Kevin's flattering words flowed like water from a river. His face didn't even show any trace of lying when he spoke. Jordan Black and the rest of Kevin's team, as well as the people from the Morris family, were all stunned when they heard this. Not to mention Jake Morris himself. At this moment, he looked like he was about to jump for joy. And instead of being weighed down by the long trek, he suddenly felt so light, as if what he was stepping on was not mud but clouds. It was clear that Kevin's plan was starting to work, as Jake's ego was already soaring.
"Do you really think so?"
Jake Morris glanced at Kevin and raised an eyebrow. Right now, he felt that the sight of Kevin was much more pleasing to his eyes compared to earlier. Perhaps it wasn't such a bad thing to keep him around as his sidekick.
"Are you really willing to be completely loyal to me?"
Jake patted his shoulder and asked. However, Kevin quickly shook his head hard and uttered firmly, "No."
"Wait, what did you just say?"
The smile on Jake's face instantly froze, and a cold gaze began to resurface in the depths of his eyes. Did Kevin just make a fool out of him in front of everyone? He really wanted to kill him even more now, not knowing the response that Kevin was about to give. On second thought, I'm not sure if it's right for me to become your protege because a person like me isn't worthy of being treated that highly in your eyes. Given this, if you don't mind, I'm still willing to be under your command as just one of your followers. From now on, I'll do whatever I can to help you, Mr. Morris. Kevin knelt down before him and lowered his head. When he finished speaking, everyone's eyes stopped on Kevin. They were all stunned.
Do you really think that way?
Jake asked again to be certain that his ears weren't fooling him. Kevin even addressed him as Mr. Morris instead of by his first name. Of course, Kevin uttered respectfully. Mr. Morris, please accept me as your follower. Dalton Steele and his other teammates were all dumbfounded when they saw this scene. For a moment, no one knew why Kevin was acting in this manner. Although they didn't believe that Kevin was afraid of Jake Morris, what was the meaning behind his flattering speech and respectful gestures just now? However, none of them dared to question what Kevin had in mind, so all they could do was to wait and see.
All right, you seem to be highly aware of my abilities and sincere enough with your words, but there's no need to be so formal with me. Because I'm a good man, I'll reluctantly accept you as my follower and just treat it as my good deed for the day.
Jake acted like a big brother and patted Kevin on the shoulder. He then added,
When we leave this mountain, give me all the pill formulas that you have.
Yes, of course, sir. Kevin quickly nodded his head a few times, looking like a lackey.
You mentioned there are treasures in the ancient tomb. Do you know what's inside?
Although Jake Morris had drifted away from his original plan to get revenge against Kevin, he still didn't forget his other objective for going on this mission. To tell you the truth, aside from the divine weapon that's been reported, I'm not particularly sure what other treasures are inside. I just feel that the spiritual energy in the ancient tomb is very dense. If you don't believe me, take a closer look. The temperature in the cave seems different from its surroundings. Kevin wasn't lying. Despite having been there before, he really didn't know what was going on in the cave. Hearing this, Jake Morris and the group of experts behind him walked over to the ancient tomb. Upon doing so, all of them frowned at the same time as they sensed that the cave was indeed filled with spiritual energy, and it was emitting a bone-chilling cold. It was truly not something that can be compared with the rest of the mountain. Jake Morris rubbed his chin and kept thinking. He wasn't a fool to think that he and his men could simply enter the ancient tomb and expect to come out unscathed. On the contrary, obtaining the treasures inside was easier said than done.
Kevin, when the ancient tomb opens, why don't you bring your men inside first?
Jake hesitated for a long time, but he still didn't have the courage to take the risk of leading everyone. Jake, what did you just say? Do you want me to take the lead instead of you? Kevin faked a look of surprise and uncertainty as he pretended to be scared. I can't do it. Jake, your power base is unparalleled. Compared to you, I would be way out of my league. With my strength, I definitely wouldn't make it out alive. Besides, I have 2 old parents and a wife waiting at home. If anything happens to me, what will happen to them in the future? It had to be said that Kevin's acting skills were very good. When he uttered these words, he looked as if he was about to cry. Seeing him like this, Jake's brows furrowed slightly.
Are you saying that you're not willing to listen to me? Could it be that everything you said just now was complete nonsense?
Kevin lowered his head humbly. Before he could finish his sentence, dozens of figures suddenly rushed over from the side. Their approach had stirred up a thick cloud of dust, making Kevin and the others cough.
Who the hell is it this time?
Jake waved his right hand hard to draw the dust away from his face. After the dust settled, they finally saw the people around them. Kevin immediately recognized 2 of them. They were Sebastian Young and Renee Silver. While this was certainly an odd pairing, Kevin wasn't completely surprised. After all, he had just asked the Union to return their campsite to the Healing Arts School earlier. And while he had agreed to form a team with Sebastian Young during the battle against the Vanguard, the 2 of them weren't really on the best of terms either. As for the others, they didn't have much of an impression on Kevin, but he could still sense the powerful spiritual energy coming from their bodies. Although the most powerful one out of the rest was only at a second stage of level 5, it was still a group of level 5 warriors. What the hell? Since when did so many level 5 warriors start fighting as hired guns? A small bounty can produce dozens of them, Kevin thought to himself. He couldn't believe it. The fact that they had all surrounded Kevin could only mean one thing. All of these people were here for Kevin. As expected, Renee Silver took a step forward. She then raised the cold sword in her hand and pointed it at Jake Morris. "Mr. Morris, please forgive us. We have no intention of becoming enemies with the Morris family. Today we only want Kevin." Dorothy had paid Thomas Williams a visit at the Williams family's mansion in New York. Introducing herself as Kevin's mother-in-law, she asked the Williams family for some support after taking care of him all these years. When Thomas clarified whether she was asking for money, Dorothy argued that money should be given freely as a gift between their families and that familial love should outweigh any past conflicts with Kevin. Watching Dorothy shamelessly blowing her own horn at Thomas Williams, who was sitting beside her, even the household staff of the Williams family couldn't help but shake their heads subtly a few times in disbelief.
"Then how much do you want?"
Thomas Williams tilted his head as he asked Dorothy this direct question. He already realized that something was wrong as soon as he asked her. "Mr. Williams, I know that your family has deep pockets, but as a kind and humble mother-in-law, I don't really need that much money myself. But any small amount will do for having supported Kevin. Perhaps you can just give me a couple of $1 million. Dorothy told him without any hesitation. When she said this, everyone's jaws dropped. They all thought that this woman was completely insane. She couldn't be serious, right? When Kevin was expelled from the Williams family a few years ago, no one had to give him another thought. Now that he had pushed his way into heading Williams Media, and now that his in-laws were attempting to get money out of the family, Kevin had become a thorn in the family side. Just a couple $1 million? How on earth was that considered a small amount by Dorothy? That number alone was enough to make everyone speechless. Did she expect the Williams family to have a money printing machine on hand somewhere in this house?
"A couple million is enough."
Thomas squinted his eyes to try and read Dorothy's mind. Based on her personal visit and bold request, Thomas Williams was quite sure that Dorothy didn't have a clue about what had happened between Kevin and his family in the past. Otherwise, even if she borrowed some courage, she wouldn't dare to step inside the gate of the Williams family's mansion. "Yes, definitely. A couple million is more than enough. After all, I'm not a greedy person. That sum of money should allow me to be comfortable for years to come." Dorothy's face looked like she was about to give Thomas Williams a big hug as her heart was bursting with joy. Deep down, she never thought that having Kevin as a son-in-law could ever make her so happy. In fact, when she initially came to the Williams family to ask for some money, she wasn't expecting Thomas Williams to immediately agree to her request. But now that it seemed as if he was already about to hand over the money to her, she couldn't help but shake her head at how foolish these rich people were.
"I wasn't asking you sincerely."
Thomas's brow suddenly furrowed and his face darkened. "Mr. Williams, what do you mean?" The smile on Dorothy's face instantly froze.
What do I mean?"
Thomas let out a cold snort and emphatically slammed his palm on the table. He then stood up from the chair and asked coldly,
"Did you just come out of the mental hospital or something? Why don't you go and find out what the Williams family is? As Kevin's mother-in-law, shouldn't you be aware of the Williams family's sheer hatred for him? If even a bastard from Kevin's small family isn't welcome here, then how dare you come to my house so easily and talk so much nonsense right to my face?"
Thomas then shouted,
"Will someone take her away and lock her up? Let her recall the suffering she endured here last time."
Dorothy suddenly recalled something when she heard this. Not long ago, she had been captured and locked up in the backyard of the Williams family's mansion. As memories of this incident flooded back into her brain, Dorothy immediately realized why she felt that the magnificent Williams family mansion was so familiar. But the people of the Williams family didn't give her the chance to think over this any further. With a look of dread and regret written all over her face, 2 or 3 members of the Williams family quickly walked forward and grabbed her tightly.
"Let me go, you guys! I don't want your money anymore, okay?"
Dorothy struggled with all of her might, but how can an old woman like her be a match for these strong young men?
"This is kidnapping! Do you believe that I won't call the police and have you all arrested?"
"Kidnapping? You're the one who barged into our house uninvited. How dare you want to call the police on us? Take her phone and bag away."
Thomas then sneered.
"It just so happens that I haven't had the chance to cause trouble for that annoying nephew of mine as of late. But thanks to you, I guess that today's my lucky day to seek some revenge."
The people of the Williams family didn't care about Dorothy's struggle. After they confiscated her bag, they dragged her away like a piece of garbage.
"Someone, go to Chicago immediately and inform Kevin. If he still wants his mother-in-law to live, then he can come to the Williams family's mansion for a little chat."
Thomas beamed with a proud smile. Although the people of the Myriads had already informed them not to find trouble with Kevin, they technically weren't the ones who took the initiative this time, as Dorothy had walked right into it herself. Furthermore, with Renee Silver just a phone call away, Thomas Williams didn't really care about what the Myriads thought of him and his family. In the dean's office of the Healing Arts School, Wayne Ford and Harley Shepard were currently in the middle of a competitive chess game. As the black and white pieces were moving all over the chessboard, they discussed other matters as well.
"The Myriads have accepted the Alliance's challenge?"
Wayne Ford held a white pawn between his index and middle fingers. It was supposed to be his turn to move, but it had been a while since he had moved any piece of the chessboard.
"The Alliance has 100,000 men, and they've agreed to fight with the Myriads on the ancient battlefield. As such, the outcome of their conflict will be decided by life and death."
Harley Shepard sighed slightly.
"This news is already spread throughout the great powers. After being silent and staying in the shadows for many years, these 2 underground titans have finally decided to fight each other for supremacy."
"What do the other schools think of this matter?"
Wayne asked with a slight frown on his face.
"The 10 great schools have all decided to just take a wait-and-see approach for the time being. As for the other smaller schools, they aren't too obvious about their current plans."
Harley replied faintly.
"Despite this, all of their leaders' intentions are very clear. No matter who wins or loses out of the 2, the righteous schools will ultimately come out on top. With the battle dealing heavy losses on both sides, they'll surely take advantage of the Myriads or the Alliance's weakened state by joining forces and attacking them all at once. Thus, everyone sees this as a good opportunity to wipe out both organizations in one fell swoop, thereby eliminating a huge threat for the great powers when the time comes."
Wayne Ford frowned even more when he heard this. After a long pause, he suddenly remarked,
"The Myriads cannot lose this battle."
Harley Shepard's right hand trembled when he heard that, causing him to almost lose his grip on his chess piece. He had known Wayne Ford for many years, and this was the first time he saw him so nervous about the fate of these 2 organizations. Given the allure of becoming strong experts with distinguished reputations within their realm, life as a member of one of the great powers wasn't as peaceful as ordinary people's lives. This was because the fierce competition for limited resources had often caused fights between the different schools and organizations. However, since they were already used to it, Harley Shepard couldn't figure out the source of Wayne Ford's worry. Both the Myriads and the Alliance were considered evil forces who had operated as underground organizations. Thus, if both sides perished together, wouldn't this outcome be what all the righteous schools should want to see the most?
"Can't you see it clearly? Ever since Travis Adams was killed by the elite experts of the 10 great schools, Brett Stewart and the Myriads have started to show signs of retreating from their evil ways."
Wayne paused for a second before continuing.
"Moreover, the Alliance has joined forces with the Pinnacle. During the last war against the Vanguard's forces, The reason why the Alliance didn't launch a sneak attack on us from behind wasn't because they feared facing the government's wrath or the possibility of the Foundation handily defeating them. Rather, it was because of the fact that the Myriads were on par with the Alliance in terms of strength. And with the Myriads secretly supporting the Foundation in the fight against the Pinnacle, the Alliance didn't want to risk facing retaliation from them at the time. Frankly speaking, the Myriads can actually serve as a great weapon to help us stop the Alliance. Their support will also allow us to face the Pinnacle face to face, and we don't have to worry about being stabbed in the back. Wayne Ford slowly moved a white bishop on the chessboard. In an instant, he had completely surrounded the Black King with white chess pieces, effectively announcing the outcome of this game. If the Myriads lose this upcoming battle, we won't have anyone to keep the Alliance in check.
But if the Alliance wants to defeat the Myriads, they'll definitely have to pay a heavy price. At that point, we can simply take advantage of the fact that they haven't recovered their full strength and wipe out the rest of their forces in one fell swoop, Harley argued firmly. Although taking advantage of someone's vulnerability to get rid of them wasn't normally something that a righteous school would do, this didn't apply when dealing with evil organizations. When dealing with evil groups like the Myriads and the Alliance, Harley knew that the ends justified the means. As part of his plan, Kevin used countless flattering words to convince Jake Morris to spare his life and take him in as his protege. However, when Kevin tried to talk his way out of entering the ancient tomb first, Jake began to suspect that he was just being fooled by him the entire time. Just then, dozens of figures suddenly surrounded Kevin. Recognizing two of them as Sebastian Young and Renee Silver, Kevin figured that the other level 5 warriors were here to claim a small bounty for killing him. Meanwhile, in a mansion just outside of Chicago, almost all of the higher-ups of the Myriads were currently gathered to discuss their current battle with the Alliance. If there were any signs of unnecessary movement from any of them, they would be killed in an instant. At the same time, Brett Stewart sat alone on his golden armchair with a serious expression on his face. A day ago, the people of the Alliance had suddenly attacked them, stifling their power in many cities across the country. They even publicly declared war on the Myriads against everyone within the Great Powers. Since everyone already knows what happened, let's talk about how we should deal with this matter now. Brett Stewart started off in a low voice as he gently rubbed his forehead. The crowd of higher-ups in the room immediately went into an uproar.
What else is there to discuss? Why don't we just go straight for the Alliance leader and kill him?
One of the enforcers yelled.
Kill him? All you know how to do is try to get rid of your problems through senseless violence. Can't you tell that we're having a proper discussion on what to do right now?
Envoy shook his head in disapproval.
Don't be such a coward. I don't have time to bother with you all. The Supreme Commander only needs to give me an army of 5,000 men. I can definitely take down the Alliance's headquarters and bring back the Alliance leader's head, the enforcer replied.
That won't do. In my opinion, we should make a long-term plan and send some delegates to negotiate a truce with the Alliance. After all, we've been coexisting harmoniously for many years, so it's the best that we make peace with them,
one of the protectors said, agreeing with the envoy. Seeing that the higher-ups weren't able to reach a consensus, Brett Stewart didn't show any expression on his face to indicate which way he was leaning toward. His eyes then shifted to Roger Knott, who had been silent all this time. Brett blinked a few times before asking,
Mr. Knott, what do you think?
Hearing this, everyone immediately quieted down and focused their gazes on Roger Knott. At that moment, Roger Knott lowered his head for a final moment of serious thought.
Supreme Commander, I suggest a counterattack.
A counterattack? According to the intel that we've collected so far, the Alliance has gathered nearly 100,000 soldiers to hunt us down.
Brett didn't seem to be surprised by his suggestion.
We have our eyes and ears inside the Alliance, and so do they inside the Myriads. In my opinion, the Alliance sensed the danger that we have brought them, and that's why they couldn't wait to attack us.
A thoughtful look appeared in Roger's eyes. "Oh, tell me, where did this crisis come from?" Brett asked with sudden interest.
Everyone knows that the Alliance hasn't changed leaders for several decades. Although their current leader has an amazing power base, he's an old man who no longer uses his own muscles as much, so I'm sure he doesn't have the energy to waste on us. By contrast, Supreme Commander, you are at the peak of your youth, and without a successor, the future state of the Alliance is unknown," Roger explained. "Furthermore, we know that the Alliance has already joined forces with the Pinnacle, and although the Vanguard's forces that they had sent were forced to retreat back to Apex Island by the Foundation's army, it doesn't mean that they won't dare to break the terms of their peace agreement and make another comeback soon. As such, we can't know for certain the true purpose of the Alliance's movements right now. What if they want to pave the way for the Pinnacle's next invasion? The only reason that the Alliance didn't make a move last time was because that they were afraid of our stance on that matter. That may be why the Alliance leader wants to defeat us first this time around."
Roger analyzed the key points one by one. He then added,
"Supreme Commander, you don't need to panic too much. We are one of the 3 major underground organizations along with the Alliance. That means that we have almost the same amount of resources and strength as them. Thus, if we really need to fight them head-on, it'll be a fairly even battle."
As soon as he finished speaking, everyone else in the room remained silent, as if they were all carefully thinking about what Roger Knott had said. At that moment, Brett Stewart suddenly raised his chin. "So Mr. Knott advocates that we fight the Alliance. Does anyone else have a different opinion?" When everyone heard this, they began to hesitate. Finally, a middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s braced himself and stepped forward. This person was also one of the 12 envoys, which was the 4th most powerful position in the Myriads. His name was Eric Atkins. "Supreme Commander, I feel that although Mr. Knott's explanation makes sense, the best way to move forward is to avoid a battle," Eric Atkins expressed firmly. "Both the Myriads and the Alliance are considered to be great titans within the great powers. If the 2 of us were to go to war, we would surely suffer heavy losses. Wouldn't this give the 10 great schools a chance to eliminate us once and for all? You have to know that those people who claim to be leaders of righteous schools are all ambitious themselves, and because they view the Myriads as a threat, they would definitely jump at any chance to get rid of us as soon as possible. Supreme Commander, as Mr. Knott mentioned, you are in the prime of your life. Thus, without a successor, there's still plenty of time to wait for the right time to strike against that old man from the Alliance. In the meantime, there's no need to focus on the short-term gains and losses if we can protect our long-term future without engaging in a senseless battle. Instead, why don't we just pretend to be afraid of them and lay low? I know that you care a lot about your reputation as Supreme Commander, but we have to be patient. When the day comes that the Myriads surpass the Alliance in every aspect, we'll finally be able to seek justice." After Eric finished speaking, he slowly returned to the crowd. This time, the entire room became even quieter. A few moments of silence passed before Brett Stewart looked around once again. "All right. Now that I've heard both sides clearly, and if no one else has anything to say, this discussion has now come to an end. After carefully deliberating on what Mr. Knott and Mr. Atkins have said, it's time for me to make my final decision. Back when I was by Travis Adams' side, the former Supreme Commander once commented on the Alliance leader. According to him, the Alliance leader is a man with great ambition and ability. However, while he has a strong power base, the Alliance, which seems to be united on the surface, has long been fraught with internal conflicts that we can take advantage of," Brett explained slowly. "Actually, all of the previous Supreme Commanders of the Myriads have been on guard against the Alliance. Therefore, I've secretly prepared a team of elite experts that no one knows about for this very purpose." Brett then turned to Roger Knott. "Mr. Knott, help me write a reply. The Myriads will accept the Alliance's challenge. In a month's time, we shall fight them to the death." These ominous words shocked everyone, and no one in the room knew quite how to react. Meanwhile, in the Williams family's mansion in New York, Thomas Williams was looking at Dorothy, who sat beside him. Upon seeing her eager face, he didn't know how he was going to react. What was the purpose of her visit today?
I didn't come here to brag to you, Mr. Williams, but Kevin is my son-in-law. In the end, that makes us family, right? Look at how many years Kevin has lived with our family. I've treated him very well all this time. Anyway, my daughter didn't know his true identity before, but even though I do now, I can assure you that there's no need for you guys to bring Kevin back here this time. However, with the Williams family being such a powerful family here in New York, it's not too much for me to ask for some help, given the way I've been supporting him, right?
Dorothy rambled on without stopping. Her tone sounded as if she was such a good and supportive mother-in-law who had always worked hard to provide for him.
Frankly speaking, I'm assuming you were here to ask for money from the Williams family?
Thomas Williams' eyes were wide open, and he was not the least bit fooled by Dorothy's words.
Mr. Williams, don't say it as if it's a bad thing. After all, Kevin is the young heir of the Williams family, and he's also the husband of my only daughter. Ever since he entered into the Jones family, I've treated him like my own son,
Dorothy said as she lowered her head humbly. She continued,
Does any amount of money really equate to all the support my family has given him? Given our respective situations, don't you think some money as a gift from your family to ours would be appropriate? Regardless, our two families should really have more interaction in the future to get to know each other better. As the saying goes, blood is thicker than water. And no matter what conflicts we may both have had with Kevin in the past, the love that's shared between our families isn't something that should be affected by all of that.
As the words spilled out of Dorothy's mouth, she realized there were no lies too big for her to tell if it meant getting her hand on Kevin's family's money.